Once upon a time, in the glory days of the great empire, when the name of the emperor struck terror into the hearts of his enemies and inspired awe in the hearts of his people, there lived in a small village a poor, honest blacksmith named Oren. Now, despite the size and the might of the empire, which stretched as far as the sun could travel in a day, it had its share of problems. For many years now, it had been sliding down the path of greed and pride. The emperor's ministers and generals were more concerned with acquiring wealth and power than serving the people. But the common folk went about their lives in peace. Or at least they would have if it was hooned for the bandits and rebels who infested the countryside. And so it was that one day, as the young and ambitious General Marcus was leading his troops into battle against the rebel force, his sword broke in the middle of the fight. And this was no ordinary sword. This was the heirloom of the royal family, passed down from emperor to emperor for generations. Now, the battle was at its peak, and the rebels were pressing hard. And without his sword, the general could do little to defend himself. So in a moment of desperation, he called out, "Whoever mends my sword with a new handle in under an hour will receive a pouch of gold, so heavy it'll make you richer than the wealthiest merchant." Word of the general's challenge reached the ears of the villagers, and soon a line of blacksmiths had formed outside his tent, each eager to win the prize and share in the general's bounty. But none of them had the right metal, nor did they have the skill to mend such a precious blade. Soon, all hope seemed lost, for it was almost an hour, and still the general waited for someone to come and save him. Then suddenly, a young man stepped forward out of the crowd. He was tall and strong, with a head full of unruly brown hair and a thick black beard. His clothes were simple, his face was weather-beaten, and a hammer hung from his belt. He introduced himself as Aran, the village blacksmith, and told the general he had just the thing for a new handle. Now, everyone scoffed at this, for they knew well the worth of the heirloom blade and the impossible task before the young smith. But General Marcus shrugged. If the boy thought he could do it, then let him try. Surely he wouldn't stand in the way of a worthy competitor. And so, while everyone else worked feverishly, trying to meet the general's demand, Oren approached the fire calmly, took up the sword, and began to work. He heated the tip of the blade until it glowed red hot. Then he inserted the new handle with all his strength and hammered it into place. And within minutes, the sword was as good as new. When the other smiths heard the clang of Oren's hammer on the anvil, they stopped what they were doing and stared at him in disbelief. They couldn't believe that anyone could complete the task in such a short amount of time. And yet there was Aaron, wiping the sweat from his brow and smiling proudly at his finished work. He presented the sword to the astonished general, who inspected it closely and found it to be perfect in every way. He kept it in his hands for a moment, turned to Aaron and said, "You are a master of your craft. What do you want? Gold, jewels, whatever you desire, you shall have it." Oren looked back at him with a gentle smile and replied, "My lord, I have little use for gold or jewels. All I want is for you to know that you have someone you can always count, someone who will never fail you, no matter how great the odds are stacked against him, that my lord is worth more than all the gold and jewels in your treasure vaults." General Marcus frowned. He had expected the young man to ask for gold or jewels, something he could easily part with, but this talk of loyalty meant little to him. Still, he knew that the boy had saved him and his men, and so he promised Oren that he would never forget what he had done for him. Then he paid the boy in full and sent him on his way. But little did he know that this was just the beginning of Oren's story, for his honesty and humility had caught the attention of someone much more important than the general. After the battle, General Marcus returned to the capital city and reported what had happened. Everyone was surprised that the blacksmith had refused the reward, but the emperor himself was intrigued and sent for him. When Aaron arrived at the palace, he was led into the throne room where the emperor sat on his golden throne, adorned with jewels and fine garments. The sight was both impressive and intimidating. Yet Aaron bowed his head respectfully and said, "Your Majesty, I am honored to have been summoned." The emperor smiled, pleased with the young man's respectful demeanor. He knew that many would have been overwhelmed by the grandeur of his court and forgotten their manners. So you are the famous Orin, the blacksmith who refused my generous reward, he said. Tell me, why would you do such a thing? Orin stood tall and met the emperor's gaze directly. My lord, I did not refuse your General Marcus's reward. In fact, I have great respect for him, but I have no need for gold or jewels. All I want is for you to know that you have someone you can always count on, someone who will never fail you, no matter how great the odds are stacked against him. The emperor leaned back in his throne, impressed by the boy's honesty and courage. He realized that he, too, had become consumed with the trappings of power and had forgotten the importance of things like honesty and humility. You are right, Orin, he said. I have allowed myself to become too caught up in my own greatness and have forgotten what truly matters. You have reminded me that it is not the size of one's kingdom or the value of one's treasures that makes one great, but rather the strength of one's heart and the purity of one's intentions. And so, instead of giving Orin a reward, the emperor did something even better. He made him the royal blacksmith, charged with the task of making sure the empire's weapons were always sharp and ready for use. Not only that, but he also appointed him as his personal blacksmith, responsible for maintaining the emperor's weapons and armor. From that day forward, Orin served the empire with pride and distinction. He may not have become rich, but he became more respected than any nobleman in the empire. His honesty and integrity were an inspiration to all who knew him, and he never forgot the importance of doing what is right, no matter how great the odds are stacked against him. Meanwhile, the emperor became a much better ruler after meeting Orin. He listened to the advice of his counselors and treated his people with kindness and compassion. He remembered that true power lay not in conquest or greed, but in justice and mercy. Under his wise rule, the empire flourished like never before and enjoyed a long period of peace and prosperity. As the years passed, Orin grew old, but his spirit never broke. He continued to work in his forge, training young apprentices and passing on his skills and his values to them. He taught them that it was not enough to be good at what they did, but they had to be honest and true in all things. And so, the legend of Orin, the humble blacksmith who reminded an empire of its true values, was passed down from generation to generation. People throughout the land told stories of his honesty, courage, and skill, and his memory lived on in the hearts of all those he had touched.